Squid Game, Squid Game, Squid Game. Everyone seems to be talking about Squid Game these days, so I'm going to contribute to the problem by talking about Squid Game. However, everyone seems to be focusing on the wrong parts of Squid Game, okay? Everyone's talking about how great the story is, how great the acting is, top 15 secrets from Squid Game that you missed, but barely anyone seems to be talking about the music of Squid Game. And personally, I really enjoyed the soundtrack. I thought it was very captivating and made the show a lot more suspenseful and really just drove in those emotions that the show is trying to get you to feel, because that's what music does. It's incredibly diverse. There's so many different tones and vibes. If you haven't seen the show, don't worry, I'm not going to be able to spoil anything because I'm literally just talking about music to you, and hopefully I can convince you to watch the show if you haven't seen it already. So if you've seen the show, you already know the premise, but if you don't know the premise, a crew of people that are in a crippling debt got brought together to play these kid games. If you lose in the kid game, you get shot, so you better not lose in the kid game because the stakes are high. But you know what? If you win, you get a ton of money. Everyone's happy, except for the people that die, but I guess they can't really feel anything because they're dead. And there's a few songs in the show that accurately depict that whole like childlike wonder of these kid games. You know, the show opens up with these kids playing a Squid Game, not like the TV show, but like Squid Game, like the game. It's like a game in South Korea, I guess. The song that opens with the show way back then is a very great depiction of that childlike game. There's these very simple percussive elements in the song and these recorders being played. The composer said that he wanted to make it feel like a kid music class. And then later on in the song, it brings in these really awesome guitars, like an acoustic guitar and some electric guitars, but it still keeps that playful feel of the song. And then another song in the soundtrack, Needles and Dalgona, also depicts that kind of childlike playful feel of the environment of the show. This time that the song plays, they get brought into this giant playground. You're in this giant playground and you're listening to this playful song. Meanwhile, people are getting shot. The genius behind this soundtrack is a man who, I'm not going to pronounce his name right, but his name is Jung Jae-il. What I really like about the soundtrack is that he was worried that if he tried to compose all these songs, it ended up being kind of boring. So he brought in two different composers. He brought in people who, I'm also not going to be able to pronounce their name right, but Park Min-jo, who I couldn't find much information about, but I guess they make music. And then they also brought in a guy who composes music for musicals. He goes by the stage name of 23, but their actual name is Sung-soo. I think I got that one right. By bringing in these other composers, it adds a very diverse element to the soundtrack, and it all feels very not boring, just like the original composer was trying to do by bringing in these two guys. For example, there's a lot of amazing percussive elements in the soundtrack. Songs like Round 6 and The Rope is Tied. If you're doing a task, if you want to make that task less boring, listen to The Rope is Tied, and that task will immediately become the most epic thing that you've done that day. There's also a lot of great guitar-driven tracks in this thing, like I mentioned in the track way back then, but there's also songs like Round 1 that is pretty much only guitar, and someone that I saw in the YouTube video said that it kind of reminds them as like a spaghetti western type of feel. I've never seen like spaghetti western films, but I can say that that guitar in Round 1 does sound pretty spaghetti-like. There's also the song Dawn that has this electric guitar playing through the whole thing, and there also has these electronic soundscapes that get added onto it. And that's another element in the soundtrack, is that there's a lot of great electronic soundscapes. In Hostage Crisis and Delivery, there's these like weird electronic effects that really just remind me of OK Computer and songs like Karma Police and like Climbing Up the Walls. There's effects in those songs that remind me of those songs. You know what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? The song Slaughterhouse 3, which is incredibly suspenseful, by the way, that whole track is pretty much like an electronic soundscape masterpiece. And that also plays into the tone of the show, because the show, if you haven't seen it, it's very suspenseful. And the song Slaughterhouse 3 has a perfect vibe to fit that mood of the show. And it's also a very ambient and spacey type of song, which I quite enjoy. I do have one complaint with the soundtrack though, and that's the fact that the song Pink Soldiers is only like 38 seconds long. Like that's like probably like one of the coolest songs on the soundtrack, and they made it only 38 seconds long. But that song is also pretty suspenseful and pretty creepy and kind of gives me some Halloween vibes, you know. I don't know a lot about like music theory or whatnot, but I've heard from my friend that that song uses Dies Irae, which I don't really know what that means, but apparently it's the it also kind of reminds me of the Oompa Loompa song, you know, like the Oompa Loompa. But the diversity doesn't end there. No, no, no. Let me tell you, because there's also these amazing string sections throughout the entire soundtrack. Very emotional and swelling strings that are being played throughout this thing. Songs like It Hurts So Bad and At the End of Round 6. Just very emotional pieces that are being used with these strings, and it's very incredible to listen to. I haven't even gotten started on the piano tracks. The piano tracks on this thing are incredible. Like the song I Remember Your Name is like a soft, slow, kind of somber piano track, but then the next track right after it, which is Unfolded, ... It's probably my favorite track off of this entire soundtrack, because I love that piano. It's kind of a faster paced song, nice kind of airy drums being played through it, and then there's some like electric guitars that are going through it. It sounds like it'd be played in like a spy movie when the spy finds out that the main villain is like his best friend or something like that. Like he makes that realization, and all of a sudden that song comes in. There's even a chiptune song on the soundtrack. It's a song that plays like when they're showing all the money that gets like dropped into the piggy bank, and all the contestants are like, whoa. I wasn't expecting for that song to be on the soundtrack, but the song is on the soundtrack. So that is everything that has to do with like the actual soundtrack that you can listen to on Spotify. But there's other music cues in the show that I found very cool. Like their use of classical music in the show is very fascinating to me. I don't know the exact tracks. I'm not a classic music aficionado, you know. I don't listen to Beethoven or Mozart or whatever. The classical music pops up every time that they're getting ready to play another game. It's this moment of like dread. The characters in the show are just like, oh here we go again. It sounds out of place, but it also doesn't sound out of place. Apparently they also had a Fly Me to the Moon cover in the show that was also very interesting, and the composer said in an interview that he wanted to use this at a time that seemed very odd and seemed like it would contrast the visuals of what was happening on the screen. I also thought that was very interesting. The soundtrack to Squid Game completely holds on its own. I like to say it's not boring because that's what the composer tried to do by bringing in those other two musicians. So it's not boring. It's so great to listen to just out and about doing your daily things. At times it could get kind of suspenseful, but you know, life is boring without a little bit of suspense, okay? Put that on a t-shirt. Squid Game, good game. See you in the next video.